days are cooler, nights are warmer, and I put the blame on you. Time moves slow, but my heart beats faster. When these eyes are looking right at you, right at you. You give me something to believe in, just what I needed. You're the closest.
So yesterday, Joel, you don't know this, but so we had a caller. We were talking about the school shooting in Georgia. We didn't know anything about the perpetrator. I didn't. So I didn't make any commentary around that, right? I knew that several people had lost their lives, two students and two teachers. And I had a call, a guy who claimed he was a 64-year-old white man from Los Angeles, California. And, we have a call screener. They'll put some topics up, because you have to call. You got to give your name, where you're calling from,
right,
and what you're going to call to talk about. And on my screen, it said fatherless children, unwed mothers or something to that effect, right? So I was like, So when y'all hear me, sometimes I know when I'm taking a troll. 90% of the time, I don't engage with trolls because to me, we have so much work to do to suss out things here that I ain't got the time for all of the nonsense, right? Every now and then, Amina or Alexa will put in parentheses, possible troll. Usually I won't take that person because I don't have the time or energy. Sometimes you don't know. Sometimes people will tell that they're saying something else and then they come in with something, but you can feel the energy immediately. If you've been doing it I've been doing radio now combined for 20 years, right? Okay. Before I was on 10 years here, I was on a little tiny AM station, which had a whole lot of people calling up in New York. So I know when everyone who says, oh, you don't let them talk. I know when somebody's not calling to engage in honest conversation immediately. Right. But I'm going to hear you out. So he calls and so I'm listening. I was like, okay, I want to know what your intentions are. And then he lands on this Christian, fatherless, unwed mother. And I was like, my BS meter. It was like it was, okay, you're full of crap. So here's the thing, Joe. You're talking about inner city youth in LA when the problem in this country are suburban white boys who are unformed, never been told no, not raised properly or at all, have no impulse control, who are literally leveling this country. And maybe, Joel, I'm going to offer this. 866-801-8255. Los Angeles troll, if you're there, call back.
Oh, yeah, I like trolls.
Come on, let's have a conversation. I got a troll master here for you. If we're being honest, maybe the inception of this country, founded by people with no impulse control, who were able to do whatever the hell they wanted. Nobody ever told them no. And that's been the thread in this country that we've been fighting. And we see it manifests in Trump. Yeah. And it manifests in all the people that want Trump to be president, see him as their leader. And now it's bled over. It's no longer about color. It's an impulse to be in charge, and when you don't get your way, you throw a tantrum. And in this case, it costs lives, right?
Yeah.
So and I have a conversation today. I'm sorry. I want to frame the conversation today around the killings in Georgia, the latest killings. The governor of Georgia, when asked what can be done to make Georgia schools safe, Governor Kemp said, this is not the day to talk about safety or policy. We need thoughts and prayers for the victims, for law enforcement, and for educators. That was his response. He's part of the problem.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I think we need to have a serious conversation about, and this is a hard conversation to have, right? I'm sure you've heard the term incel and you've heard the term the manosphere, like this place where young men go and get basically radicalized. And what we don't talk about is the understanding of talking to young boys. This is white boys, black boys, boys in general, talking to them about the conception of masculinity that's separate from this idea that you have to be tough and you have to be hard and you have to be, emotionally inept, right? So you don't know how to mitigate your emotion. You don't know how to take rejections because you're supposed to be a specific type of person based on, like, we talk a lot about what the media does to women and women's images, but we don't talk a lot about what the media does to men and men's images. And then the people who do talk about it will say things like, we need to talk about this idea of how men are being treated, but then they go and blame women about it. So there's like the toxic aspect of this. And then I think there's this way in which we need to talk about it, because this is what we're actually just not dealing with young men in the way that we're supposed to be dealing with humans, right? We're thinking of them as like people. I have 2 daughters and 2 sons. I mean, I have 3 daughters and a son. And people always talk to me about, are girls different than boys? And I'm like, girls have to move through the world different than boys, but they're human. So their psyche is the same. And we need to talk about that and address that. And we don't.
You know, there was a clip. I I found a clip on Instagram, which speaks exactly to this. And I actually 866-801-8255. We're gonna have a conversation today. It may be uncomfortable, but this is the space where I feel like we can have it. You know, free from, you know, there are no talking points happening here. This thing happened for the 20-umpteenth time in this country. People can't send their children to school. Teachers can't feel safe in the school. We're hiding under desks. We're taking cell phones. The police this time rushed in, and Uvalde, they ran the other direction. But it's a culture that we're not addressing. As we talk about inner city youth and we talk about fatherless Black children, we don't talk about this. And then one news outlet, Joe, had the audacity to put the picture of the little boy who lost his life and said he was the gunman. And I was like, man, I even said yesterday, the problem is not the face of this mass shooting, killing. I don't feel, coming to school, shooting up everybody. It's not a Black boy. It's not Black. It's not Black. The face is not Black. So, and I didn't know yesterday, but I suspected, because this is the prototype. So there must be something going on that we're not talking about. And so the other question, Joel, why aren't we talking about it? Because now we're going to have to look at parenting. We're going to have to look at what. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's just we're not talking about it specifically because of what I stated before. It's because there's an impetus behind like talking about issues specifically with men that gets derailed into toxic masculinity and misogyny. And it needs to be developed, and we need to talk in such a way that we go past that. Like I call them bro flakes when I talk to these people, these like toxic masculine men who come out who think that the only language we can use is anger and stoicism, and we need to have a real serious conversation that bypasses the misogyny that's embedded in those ideas and get at the heart of things. I remember going to this resort where I sat with these men. It was an all men's resort, and I remember sitting around the table with these men and crying. Yeah, it was all men. Yeah, it was a resort, and they have a men.
Is it all male resort?
Yeah, they have a men's week and they have a women's week. So like you can go at different times. It's very bougie, so I won't go into it. But but I just remember sitting around with these men and like having a real discussion about feelings. And these are men who are like really super successful. One man had just sold his company and made a shit ton of money, but also was like lost about what he was supposed to do now. Right. And it's just like, we don't see stuff like that and we don't talk about it. And this was a group of men where we could sit, like these men were crying. Right. And so like, that's what we need to do more of, like sitting in a room and cry. Right. And just feel okay about that and feeling, because we don't do that with young boys. We tell them to be tough and they have to learn how to fight and they have to do all these other things. When in reality, we need to be teaching them how to mitigate their emotions, how to manage their emotions, because we're not teaching them to do that.
All right. Let me play this clip because I think it captures everything that you said. Joel Christian Gill is here. Dr. Joel Christian Gill. Play the clip, Smith.
If you stop your son from playing with toys like kitchen sets and baby dolls, don't be surprised if that little boy grows up to think that cooking and taking care of a baby is a woman's job. And if you only buy your son clothes with skulls and army guys on it and think a shirt with a heart on it is too girly, don't be surprised if that little boy grows up to think that he needs to suppress his love and affection for people. Bad men aren't born bad. It happens from parents saying shit like, "Oh, I'm so glad I had a son. Raising a daughter is so much harder." No, it's not. You're downplaying the importance of raising boys into being functional men that don't hurt people. Is it different? Yeah, sure. There's lots of shit different from raising a daughter and a son. But one's not harder or more important. Stop getting it in your head that you took the easy way out from raising a son rather than a daughter. If anything, it's more important to me that you raise your son to not bully and harass my daughter when they get into school together.
I couldn't agree with that more. Like I just feel like people should just let that sink in. Like we are, like the ways we talk to boys and how we have to move through how boys have to move through the world is just as fraught and difficult as what girls have to do. But we don't talk about it because men are supposed to be stronger. Men are supposed to be this and men are supposed to be that. And I think we need to start telling these boys it's okay to cry, right? It's okay to have emotions. It's okay to feel a certain way about a thing. It's okay to take, I just remember my wife, when people would leave, my wife would go and travel. And this was always a funny thing because my wife's an executive. And so she'd be gone and I'd be at home with my kids. And people would always ask her, who's taking care of the kids? Like I couldn't do it. And so she finally started telling people, I just leave a bowl of Cheerios in the bedroom and hope for the best, because it was such a ridiculous question, right? Or people who used to say they babysit their kids. You don't babysit your own kids, right? Like you take care of your kids. I don't know. Like there's just a lot of things that it's almost like peeling off the skin. We need to exfoliate that bullshit from our lives.
But if it's the founding principle, right? So we have so much in this nation that needs to be unearthed and reframed or erased. But it's wild. It's almost like the Germans following a short, dark-haired, Jewish-looking person while they touted an Aryan race of people who looked the exact opposite, but that was your leader. It is that level of disassociation or dissonance or hypocrisy that we live in every day, with these quote unquote founding fathers who were enslavers, rapists, wore wigs and makeup and high heels and stockings, but were the bastion of masculine exceptionalism at the same time.
Don't forget that they raped enslaved Africans for shits and giggles either.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I say enslaver, built into the enslaving part is Washington using the teeth of those enslaved.
Exactly.
Those were people's teeth, not wooden teeth.
Right.
So let's went after Ona Judge and went after Hannibal, another one of his enslaved people. Yeah. Ona Judge was like, "Come find me." I left. Come find me. Good luck with that. But that's how mad. Like he was big mad that somebody escaped. He had 300 enslaved people. He wanted to go after the one that ran away.
Exactly.
Like, you got 299 others. 866-801-8255. Because we don't have honest conversation in this country. And I'm not saying these people weren't brilliant. They weren't well read. Two things can be true.
Exactly.
But if we don't have a whole picture of who these people are, we can't be whole because we're following an ideal that doesn't exist.
Exactly.
This one never told a lie. Well, he raped and held people in bondage.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
I mean, Karen, people don't come out. Africans don't typically come out of Africa looking like us, right? They are completely different, right? And so we don't talk about that. We don't talk about these things. And like that ideal, and that it's funny that you say that ideal because you've seen this tattoo of my dad on my hand. My dad died when I was 5. But I put the tattoo on my hand, not because I knew him, right? Because I didn't really know him, but because the lies in a lot of ways that were told about him, like the ways in which he basically, according to my family, my dad like walked on water and, saved little ladies, did all this other stuff, right? But when I started talking to my mom and my grandmother, before my grandmother passed away, they would tell me these stories about him. And my dad was a gangster, right? He was like a completely different man, but I lived up to an ideal that they had told me about him. And so that became who I am the father that I am because of the idea of who I thought he was. Right. Which in a lot of ways is like a lie in sense, but it actually made me a better person. And so I think in some ways you can have these ideologies that make us live up to these better principles. But in America, the toxic masculinity, like the things that the criminal justice system does to men specifically are an atrocity, right? And they're based on misogyny, right? The fact that if my wife and I were to divorce, my wife makes way more money than me, right? They would expect me to take care of her, even though she's the one that's the breadwinner, right? And
well, that's changing, Joel.
That is changing, but
No,
But
I'm
they
just
would
playing.
also default her to taking care of the kids, right? Because it's a woman. And so when you see these things happening, the men that are in these situations, that's why I mean they go back and they blame feminism, right? They say it's
Right.
feminists that are doing it, not realizing that it's a misogynist idea that men can't take care of babies.
Listen, I covered child welfare and education on the editorial page, editorial board of the New York Daily News for 4 years. Being at family court was one of the most depressing assignments. And I did it on the editorial page, but I'm so good at my job. I didn't have to be in them courts, but I was. And the way in which the court leans on men, and, you know, it's why I'm able to have such a fair and balanced a view of things, because it was always the default that the child will be better with the woman. But that wasn't the case necessarily. Right. Why? And I'll be sitting there like, and then he's got to pay. His pay is garnished, and that's going to, create a bitterness. Who the hell wants to show up when you're berating me every time I show up to get my children, and I got to pay for this? And I get it, and there's no place to go where anyone's hearing you. So Kevin Samuels is listening. Was it the Manosphere is listening?
The Manosphere.
These incel Reddit groups are listening. At least I have somebody that's listening, and it is a failure of the system, because I always say you never want government to parent. Government does not make a good parent. No. And actually, government's not really good at anything but roads and bridges and tunnels. Like, let's get some trains going.
War.
But you don't want them involved in war. You don't want them involved in your family. That's something you got to take care of. But this is where we are. And when they dole it out, they don't dole it out fairly at all. And then we create these narratives that are anecdotally true, but also true, because if you're experiencing it, it's your truth.
And also, like, the thing I don't want to put too fine a point on it, because I don't want to necessarily think about like this is just a manosphere problem, because there's a lot of liberal ideologies. It's like, oh, we should just get rid of guns, right? But that's the end result, right? We're not dealing with the reason because if we get rid of guns, right? Like, I'm not one way or another, we need to deal with the gun situation. So I want to make sure that's clear. But at the same time, if we get rid of the gun and we don't deal with that, there'll be like those boys in England now, they don't have access to gun. They're stabbing people, right?
Yes.
So like we are not dealing with this idea of this toxic masculine ideal that.
Well, can we change the language? Because that's triggering when somebody hears, like, I've been really, language is powerful, Joe. You know that as an educator. And it's like CRT and all, like, people get hung up on words and they just shut down and don't hear anything else. What we're talking about is a vibration, a higher vibration. And we're talking about emotional quotients. We're talking about being in touch with your humanity. We're talking about people being people, not these cookie cutout avatars of themselves, but really tapping into, like, what is it that you want out of life? Like, we need to dig into that with all of our children.
Yeah, and before anybody gets it twisted, I don't think masculinity is toxic. I don't think that it's inherently toxic. I think masculinity is inherently good, especially when you are thinking in terms of, like, I take care of my family, I take care of my community. Like, I feel like that's a masculine way to think about things. Like, like, you're not going to come in my community and, you come in my community as a man, you're going to fuck around and find out, right? That's what I'm saying, right? Like, that's the kind of masculinity that's protecting, that brings in your circle, that protects your friends, that, like that masculine man that I always think about, like that man that shows up that's like kind but not nice. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're an idiot. Why'd you get on the road with that car, but it's going to help you fix that tire? Do you know what I mean? That's the kind of masculinity that we need more of in this world. We need less of the kind of masculinity that says, oh, you got painted fingernails, Joel, you can't be a real man. And I'm like,
F around to find out. Please don't do it. 866. And to your point, as a woman, that's all you want is protection. And you don't necessarily, I always wanted to not necessarily have to be provided for, but not have to work if I didn't. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I love working, but I don't ever want to have to do something if I'm in partnership with you.
Exactly.
And that should be mutual. Yes, we should be working so that neither one of us has, but at the end of the day, it's protection. I should be the one with the baseball bat going to check on that noise. And if I gotta be the one, then why are you here?
But at the same time, though, maybe you are the one, right? Maybe you're more brave. Maybe I'm the one.
No,
but I'm just saying, What I'm saying is that
I
we
don't wanna
shouldn't
be the
define
one.
those roles, that we should like look for
I
those
think you're
that
right.
balance
You're
those
right. You're
things
right.
out, right? So like,
Yes, you're right.
like I feel like I would be that person, right? But there are things that I'm afraid of that my wife takes the initiative on, right? And I think that there are a
Spiders?
lot of people. No, it's more like we got a boat this summer, and so she drove the boat because I'm scared. I'm scared of.
Okay, because you got epigenetically,
Yeah.
you got some epigenetics you got to work through with boats and water and being black.
My days are cooler, nights are warmer, and I put the blame on you. Time moves slow, but my heart beats faster. When these eyes are looking right at you, right at you. You give me something to believe in.